Hello again, my dear family of St. Matthew. So last night we celebrated the beginning of the Holy Triduum, the evening of Holy Thursday at the Last Supper, the first Mass. And traditionally what follows that, and I've been doing that for over 12 years after the Mass of the Last Supper, we would go and visit the 7 churches, and this year was not, we're not able to do that. You know, that began with St. Philip Neri, a popular priest in Rome who was always interested in doing things that would bring people, especially young people, together. He was a 16th century saint and is also noted for a Holy Week tradition that has endured in Rome to the present time, but not this year. So on Monday of Holy Week, St. Philip began the 7 church walk, visiting Rome's 4 major basilicas. That would be St. Peter in the Vatican, St. Mary Major, St. John Lateran, which is the Cathedral Church of Rome, and St. Paul outside the walls, where the body of St. Paul is buried, very close to where he was beheaded, outside the walls of that Rome at that time, I should say. And then he would then also visit the 3 of the minor basilicas, St. Sebastian, St. Lawrence outside the walls, and Holy Cross. Now, some of you might know or remember at our last school gala. This year, unfortunately, we've needed to postpone it. But last year, in 2019, my mom and I bid for a trip to Rome, 5-day trip, and we got it. And so this year, since I can't do it in reality, the visit, I was going to do some visits to Joliet, as a matter of fact, to St. Patrick's, where I was pastor for a little while, the Cathedral of St. Raymond, maybe St. Paul's or St. Anthony's in Joliet, maybe to look at that beautiful Catholic Byzantine church, the Annunciation of the Mother of God in Homer Glen, maybe visit my former parish of St. Andrew the Apostle in Romeville. That all fell through, so hopefully that'll happen next year. I'm gonna again attach to this particular video a few more of my little snippets, little video clips that I made on that trip to Rome. I particularly wanted to go see the 4 major basilicas, which I was able to do, so that follows this introductory part. And then I also got to see the Holy Cross, the Church of the Holy Cross, Santa Croce in Jerusalem. And I'll attach some of those pictures to this as well. So although we can do the visits, so I wasn't able to do the visits last night, we're going to do them here virtually. And the tradition is also, I think there's a plenary indulgence attached to it. When you visit Rome and you make a visit to each of the 4 major basilicas, you get a plenary indulgence as well. It's a great thing to do. So maybe this is a preparation for one day when travel bans are off and we're back to traveling and the skies are open, maybe plan a trip to Rome. It's one of the things that pilgrims do when you go to Rome. And so on this day, let's open up our hearts and the great gift of our faith extended throughout the whole world, but in so many ways for us as Latin Rite, part of the Roman Catholic Church, Rome is a central place for us. And so let's continue to keep one another in prayer, the whole universal Catholic Church and all the people of the world, that God continues to pour out his graces that are so powerfully given to us in the Blessed Sacrament of the Eucharist, all of that flowing from his cross, from his divine mercy, from his heart that was pierced with a sword and poured out blood and water over the whole planet, over the whole earth, and throughout all creation, and into our very hearts, and into our families, and into our world. Let's let those graces flow. So here's a map of Rome, and here's a little bit of a more close-up, and you can see, you might need to pause, and then you can see where these places are that we're going. The four major basilicas, St. Peter's, which we're going to start with here, me and my mom getting ready for Mass in the morning, and then we're going to go over to St. John Lateran, the Cathedral Church, and then over to St. Paul, outside the walls, and then over to St. Mary Major, the last one, which has a relic of the manger where Jesus was born. But this is St. Peter's, where my mom and I celebrated Mass early in the morning. That's why the pictures were dark there of the outside of St. Peter's Basilica. This is the chapel that my mom and I celebrated the Eucharist in Slovenian and in Latin. I didn't have English, and that was the little chapel there on the left, where we celebrated the Eucharist, and that was in the morning afterwards. We looking out over St. Peter's Square, and as the sun rises, the light comes into St. Peter's Square, and here you can see where it's built on. This is Nero Circus, where St. Peter was crucified upside down, and that's the obelisk that's there, and then a little bit north is where he was buried, and then so this Constantine's church was built over the tomb that was found among mostly the gladiators and other people that lived in that neighborhood. And then Constantine built the first basilica of St. Peter over that place, and now this is the one that exists. And here is the holy door right there. You see a little bit, but we're entering on the side here of the Pietà, Michelangelo's famous Pietà, which you might know the story a little bit. Got damaged. Someone little disturbed in the mind took a hammer and started hammering the body of Jesus, thinking he was Jesus, and I don't know, all kinds of. So now they had to put glass in front of it. They repaired the damage as best they could, of course, and then here's the rest of beautiful Basilica of St. Peter, built over the tomb of St. Peter. There's the holy door. I think she said our tour guide might be opened in 2025. It's just a big concrete door that blocks the way. This is where they have Eucharistic adoration in the Basilica of St. Peter's.
And you can find the sculptures of Bernini in the Borghese Gallery in Rome or in many churches. So Bernini is almost everywhere. And this is the only chapel where we have real paintings.
And St. John the 23rd, where he is displayed, the remains. So underneath the baldacchino is where St. Peter's buried. Here's that famous window of the Holy Spirit. And underneath that baldacchino, that structure with the four pillars, is directly below that is where the cemetery was and where they found the bones of St. Peter. And on the side there is that famous statue of St. Peter, where people have touched it so that the that the foot of Peter is like all worn down. I think it's made out of bronze or something, and it's completely worn down to a very shiny surface. So many people have touched that foot. Here's the main nave or the aisle, and everything's so proportionate. It's this is such a huge basilica, but in pictures you don't get that feeling. There's my mom. Hey, Mom. And we're right in the center of the nave in the transept, and then we're back to the baldacchino and the awesome dome that was built over that. So there's my mom looking out from St. Peter's Basilica out into the St. Peter's Square, and then we're getting ready for the Wednesday audience with the Holy Father. right here in front of the beautiful facade of St. Peters Basilica, one of the four major basilicas.
Der Elternbeirat der Franziskusschule Mutlangen und eine Gruppe von Lesern des Traunsteiner Tageblatts. Schülerinnen, Schüler und Lehrer folgender Schulen: Maria Barth Realschule Augsburg, Hermann Hesse Gymnasium Kall, St. Ursula Gymnasium Düsseldorf, Kurfürst Friedrich Gymnasium Heidelberg, Ursulinen Gymnasium Mannheim, Maria Ward Realschule Mindelheim, Maximilian Kolbe Schule Rottweil, Gymnasium Kolleg St. Sebastian Stegen, Geschwister-Scholl-Gymnasium Tübingen sowie die berufsbildende Schule aus Walsrode.
One of the beautiful traditions is also a blessing of those who are newly married, and then after the Wednesday audience, and then they go out and they get blessing by the Holy Father. That image was an image of in the Vatican museums. Now we go to the St. John Lateran. I actually like to call it St. John's Lateran. It's dedicated to Christ the Savior, first of all, and then two Johns, actually, St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. And this is land that was donated to the Catholic Church early on by the Lateran family, and that's where then the cathedral is, where the seat, the cathedra of the Holy Father is. Of course, there's the famous, you hear this sound a lot, the ambulance. The famous ambulance of Rome. That building right directly in front is where the steps where Jesus went up to be judged by Pontius Pilate are located. They moved them from Jerusalem to here, to Rome. There's the facade of St. John Lateran, St. John's Lateran. Now we're kind of in the vestibule in the front. We're looking out at St. John Lateran Square, outside that gate, and now we're going to enter into the Cathedral of the Bishop of Rome. There's our St. Matthew. Along the nave are all of the apostles, and including St. Paul as well. And here's the main altar, the baldacchino there. The Blessed Sacrament's on the left, and here on the right, there's St. Paul. But then also, kind of in the main section of the apse there is the chair, the cathedra of the Holy Father, the Bishop of Rome. There's the main nave again. You can see statues of the apostles and the Blessed Sacraments there in the center. The main altar is on our right. And back to the chair. Now we're going to St. Paul outside the walls. So there's an extension. You got to go south along the Tiber River. And there you can see again, I put the metro line that goes to St. Paul. There he is, St. Paul outside the walls, the statue right before the facade of St. Paul outside the walls. We'll go entering on the right, on the door on the right, and here's the nave, beautiful nave of St. Paul outside the walls.
This new construction is built over a church that had been here before, that had housed the remains of St. Paul, except for his head, which is located in Tre Fontane, not too far from here, where he was beheaded. I believe that's the case. But this is where his body's buried underneath. So underneath the main altar, we're heading that way right now. There's also the famous church that has the medallions of all of the popes. All of the popes are pictured and named here. And that's that famous poster, if you've ever seen that, of all the popes. I think 265, 66, something like that. Here's the current one. And now we go right underneath the main altar is the sarcophagus, the place where St. Paul is buried, and then a chain that's traditionally pretty authentic, I think, that was used to chain St. Paul when he was a prisoner here, or in Rome. They took him out south of the main section of the Forum area. He was a Roman citizen, so he was, unlike St. Peter, who was crucified, because St. Peter was not a citizen of Rome. St. Paul was. He was a citizen of Tarsus, and Tarsus was considered a Roman city, which means those born there are automatically Romans. And that's why St. Paul was beheaded and not crucified. And one last look at the nave of St. Paul outside the walls. And the main altar and the tomb of St. Paul. Now we move to Santa Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major. Beautiful story. You can look that up. There she is. It houses. It's connected with Our Lady of the Snows. Beautiful story. It houses the some of the relics of the manger where Jesus was born. Our Mother Mary here. Santa Maria Maggiore. There's a picture of the nave, the structure of the church. Here's the nave. There's a tradition where they kind of let down some white pieces of paper or something like confetti every time to remind. At some point, I forget which feast day, right down the center, up from in the ceiling, and they let it down to remind them of Our Lady of the Snows. And here's a image of a video of the manger, the relics of the manger. Jesus was born. Of course, I had to put Ave Regina Pacis. I saw that in the church as well. Hail, Queen of Peace. Just a very short walk from St. John's Lateran is one of the 7 pilgrimage churches in Rome, which pilgrims typically do not want to miss, called Santa Croce in Gerusalemme, the Holy Cross in Jerusalem, which houses an extraordinary collection of relics from the Holy Land and a full-sized replica of the Shroud of Turin, among other interesting things as well. According to tradition, the basilica was consecrated around 325 to house the relics of the Passion of Jesus Christ brought to Rome from the Holy Land by Empress St. Helena, the mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine I. At that time, the basilica's floor was covered with soil, rocks and gravel from Jerusalem, thus acquiring the title in Jerusalem, in the sense that a piece of Jerusalem was literally moved to Rome for its foundation. St. Helen brought to Rome, also after her pilgrimage to the Holy Land, the fragments of the true cross and one of the nails used in the crucifixion. Later were added to this collection the joint of the index finger of St. Thomas the Apostle, a part of the cross of the good thief, and 2 thorns from the crown of Jesus. 3 small wooden pieces of the true cross remain there now, but a larger piece of the true cross in the year 1629 was moved over to St. Peters Basilica, to the Vatican, into the Basilica, where it is kept there near the statue of St. Helena. So reflecting on these relics of the Holy Cross that are in the Santa Croce, the Holy Cross Church in Rome, it's an appropriate way to end this video on Good Friday.